Commander Jiho stood in the center of the Deep Space Communications Array, watching the massive holographic display that showed humanity's 12 star systems. Each system was represented by a glowing blue dot, and normally, all 12 would pulse with regular signals from the colonies. Today, only 4 dots were still pulsing. "Show me the timeline again," Jiho said to his communications officer. Lieutenant Min-Su.Minsu brought up the data on the main screen. "It started 3 months ago, sir. The mining stations in the Kepler system went silent first. Thought it was equipment failure. Then the agricultural worlds in Proxima stopped responding. We sent repair teams, but they never reported back." Jiho walked closer to the display, his boots echoing in the quiet chamber. The Luna Station Communications Center was built deep inside the moon, protected by layers of rock and metal. It was humanity's ear to the galaxy, listening for signals from across the void of space. "What about Wolf 359? Jiho asked, pointing to another darkened on the display. "The military outpost there had the strongest defenses of any human settlement," Minsu replied. 3 battlecruisers, orbital weapon platforms, and a garrison of 5,000 soldiers. They went dark 6 days ago. The last transmission was a distress call that lasted exactly 7 seconds. Jiho frowned. Wolf 359 was supposed to be impossible to attack. The system had early warning sensors that could detect ships jumping out of hyperspace from light years away. The fact that something had destroyed it so quickly was deeply troubling. "Any pattern to the attacks?" Jiho asked. "They're moving inward toward Earth's," Minsu said quietly. "Whatever is destroying our colonies is working its way through the outer systems first. At this rate, they'll reach the inner systems within 2 weeks. Before Jiho could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the communications center. The sound was piercing and urgent, indicating an incoming priority transmission. All around the chamber, technicians rushed to their stations. "Signal coming in from Tau Ceti," shouted Corporal Hajin from her console. "It's on the emergency frequency." "Put it through," Jiho ordered. The speakers crackled with static. Then a voice came through, distorted and panicked. "This is Dr. Kyung-ho at Tau Ceti Research Station. We are under attack. The enemy is. They're not like anything we've ever seen. They're changing our people. God, they're changing them into something else." The transmission cut to static. For a moment, then continued. "If anyone receives this, do not come here. Do not try to help us. Whatever these things are, they're not just killing us. They're making us into part of something horrible. The colonists. They're still alive, but they're not human anymore. They're screaming, but the screams are. They're harmonized. Like a choir." Then came the sound that would haunt Jiho's dreams. For the rest of his life, through the static, he heard the voices of an entire colony screaming in perfect unison. The sound was not random panic or terror. It was organized, musical, as if thousands of people were being forced to sing together. While experiencing unimaginable pain, the transmission ended abruptly, leaving the communications center in stunned silence. "Get me Admiral Taman," Jiho said, his voice steady despite the fear growing in his chest. "Tell him we need an emergency meeting of the Defense Council." While Minsu made the call, Jiho turned to Dr. Yuna, the xenobiologist who had been stationed at Luna Station for the past 6 months. She was pale, her hands shaking as she analyzed the audio from the Tau Ceti transmission. "Doctor, what do you make of that sound?" Jiho asked. Yoon-Ah looked up from her equipment, her eyes wide with fear. "Commander, I've studied alien biology. For 20 years, I've heard the sounds that creatures make when they're hunting, when they're dying, when they're mating. But this... This is something else entirely." She turned her screen toward Jiho, showing a complex waveform analysis. The screams are not random. They're following a specific harmonic pattern. It's as if the victims are being forced to produce sound at exact frequencies. But more disturbing is that the pattern is mathematical. It's organized. What does that mean? It means whatever is doing this to our people is intelligent, extremely intelligent. And it's using our colonists as some kind of ... instrument. They're still alive, still conscious, but they're being controlled to produce these sounds. Jiho felt a chill run down his spine. Are you saying the colonists are being kept alive on purpose? I'm saying they're being transformed. Their vocal cords, their nervous systems, probably their entire bodies are being modified to serve some purpose we don't understand yet. The communications panel chimed, and Minsu called out, "Admiral Taman is on his way, sir. He's bringing the entire Defense Council." Jiho nodded, but his mind was racing. Humanity had spread across 12 star systems over the past century, establishing colonies, mining operations, and research stations. They had encountered strange phenomena, ancient ruins, and even signs of extinct alien civilizations. But they had never encountered anything hostile, anything that seemed designed to hunt and transform other species. 2 hours later, the Defense Council had assembled in the secure conference room adjacent to the communications center. Admiral Walt Taman, a stern man in his 60s, sat at the head of the table. Around him were General So-young, the head of Colonial Defense Forces, Director Jae-wook from Earth's Intelligence, and Captain Yoon-suk from the Space Navy. "Show them the transmission," Admiral Taman ordered. Jaho played the audio from Tau Ceti. Again, the council members listened in grim silence to the harmonized screaming. When it ended, the room remained quiet for several long moments. "What are our military options?" the Admiral asked General So-young. "Limited," she replied. "We have battle fleets at Earth, Mars, and the Jupiter moons. But our forces are spread thin across the colonies. If we pull back to defend the inner systems, we abandon millions of colonists in the outer territories." "What about evacuation?" asked Director J-WOOK. Captain Yoon-suk shook her head. "Not possible. We don't have enough transport ships to evacuate entire colonies. And based on the attack pattern, we wouldn't have time anyway." Admiral Taman leaned back in his chair, his face showing the weight of command. "So we're facing an enemy that can destroy our most heavily defended positions and ours, that transforms our people instead of simply killing them, and that's systematically working its way toward Earth." "Yes, sir," Jiho confirmed. "And our conventional military forces are insufficient to stop them." "That appears to be the case, sir." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, staring at the holographic display showing the darkened colony systems. Finally, he spoke. "There may be one option, but it's not something any of us wanted to consider." He turned to a young officer who had been standing quietly in the corner. "Corporal Sun-woo, bring me the Prometheus files." Sun-woo approached the table with a sealed briefcase. His hands were shaking slightly as he opened it and withdrew a thick folder marked with warning symbols and clearance codes. "What is Prometheus?" General So-young asked. Admiral Taman opened the folder, revealing photographs and documents that made several council members gasp. "Prometheus is our most classified project. It's been running for 15 years in a hidden facility in the asteroid belt." He showed them images of humans who had been changed in ways that seemed impossible. One photo showed a woman walking through a solid wall. Another showed a man floating in midair, surrounded by what appeared to be a gravitational field. During our expansion into space, we encountered things that changed some of our people, the Admiral explained. Alien artifacts, dimensional anomalies, biological agents that rewrite human genetics. Most people who encountered these things died, but a few survived the transformation. He paused, looking around the table at the shocked faces of his colleagues. "We've been keeping them in a secure facility, studying them, trying to understand what they've become. They're no longer fully human, but they've retained their memories, their loyalty to humanity." "You're talking about releasing them to fight this enemy?" Director Jae-wook said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're the only weapons we have that might be effective against something this advanced," Admiral Taman replied. "But the cost? Once we release them, we can't control what they might become. They could save humanity, or they could become something worse than the enemy we're fighting." The council sat in stunned silence, contemplating the impossible choice before them. Outside, the communications array continued to monitor the void, waiting for more signals from the dying colonies. In the depths of space, something ancient and hungry continued its methodical advance toward Earth, transforming everything in its path into instruments of a cosmic symphony that only it could hear. The screams had reached Earth's ears. Now humanity would have to decide whether to free the monsters they had created, or watch their species be consumed by something far worse. The The choice would define not just humanity's survival, but what it meant to be human at all. The journey to the Prometheus facility took 18 hours through the asteroid belt. Admiral Taman sat in the command chair of the military transport ship, watching the dark rocks drift past the viewport. Beside him, Dr. Yuna studied the classified files he had given her, her face growing paler with each page. "This is impossible," she whispered, looking at a medical report. "According to this, Subject 7 can manipulate gravitational fields with her mind. The energy requirements alone should kill her." "Keep reading," Admiral Taman said quietly. Dr. Yuna turned the page and found photographs of a woman floating in a white room, surrounded by objects that were orbiting her like planets around a star. The woman's eyes were closed and she looked peaceful, but there was something wrong with the space around her. Light bent in strange ways and the air itself seemed to shimmer. "Her name is Nari," the Admiral explained. "She was a physicist on the research station at Vega Prime. They found an artifact buried in the planet's core, something that looked like a crystalline sculpture. When Nari touched it, she was exposed to gravitational forces that should have torn her apart. Instead, they changed her." The ship's captain, a young man named Kunmin, called out from the navigation console. "Sir, we're approaching the facility. They're requesting identification codes." "Send them Protocol 7, Admiral," Taman replied. "Tell them we're here for a full status briefing." As their ship moved closer to the facility, Dr. Yuna could see it was nothing like the research stations she knew. The structure was built into a large asteroid, with only a small docking bay visible from the outside. Heavy weapons were mounted on the surface, and she could see patrol ships moving in precise patterns around the perimeter. "Why all the security?" she asked. "Because what we keep inside could destroy entire planets if it escaped," Admiral Taman replied. The docking procedure was unlike anything Dr. Yuna had experienced. Their ship passed through 3 separate scanner arrays, each one examining them with different types of radiation. Automated systems checked their DNA, their brain patterns, and even their recent memories. Only after all checks were complete were they allowed to dock. Dr. Yunji was waiting for them at the airlock. She was a small woman in her 50s, with gray hair and tired eyes. She wore a white lab coat covered in security badges and warning symbols. "Admiral," she said, saluting, "I received your message. Are you really considering activation?" "The situation is that serious," Admiral Taman replied. "Dr. Yuna, this is Dr. Yunji, the director of the Prometheus facility. Doctor, please give us a full briefing on our subjects." Dr. Yunji led them through corridors that seemed to with energy. The walls were lined with sensors and cameras, and Dr. Yuna noticed that some of the equipment was designed to detect things she had never heard of, like dimensional fluctuations and quantum disturbances. "We currently house 12 subjects," Dr. Yunji explained, as they walked. Each one was transformed by exposure to different alien phenomena. Some volunteered for controlled experiments. Others were changed by accident during exploration missions. They stopped at a large observation window. Beyond the thick glass was a room that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. The walls flickered between different states of matter, and the floor appeared to be made of crystallized space itself. "Subject 3, Dr. Yunji said. Captain Dong Han. He was exploring a derelict alien ship in the Sirius system when he encountered what we believe was a dimensional stabilizer. The device malfunctioned and phased him partially out of normal space. As they watched, a figure materialized in the room. It was clearly human in shape, but translucent, like a ghost. The figure waved at the observation window, and Dr. Yuna could see that it was smiling. He can become completely solid when he concentrates, Dr. Yunji explained. But staying in normal space requires constant effort. When he relaxes, he phases back into the dimensional spaces between reality. Can he control it? Admiral Taman asked. To some extent, but the ability is growing stronger over time. We estimate that within 5 years, he won't be able to return to normal space at all. They moved to the next observation chamber. This one was filled with what appeared to be a miniature storm system. Lightning flashed between metal rods, and the air itself seemed to be alive with electricity. Subject 9, Dr. Yunji said. Lieutenant Wu Jin. He was exposed to a dimensional gateway on an abandoned research station. The experience gave him the ability to perceive space in ways that human minds weren't designed to handle. The storm in the chamber suddenly calmed, and a man stepped forward. His eyes were completely white, and when he looked at the observation window, Dr. Yuna felt as if he was seeing through her into some deeper truth. He can see in 11 dimensions, Dr. Yunji explained. He understands the universe in ways that we can barely comprehend. But the knowledge is slowly driving him insane. He has to be sedated most of the time to prevent complete mental breakdown. Dr. Yuna felt sick. These people are prisoners. They're volunteers, Dr. Yunji corrected. Everyone here chose to stay. They understand that their conditions are progressing, that they're becoming something that isn't human anymore. But they also understand that they might be humanity's only hope in a crisis like this. They continued the tour, meeting more subjects. There was Janae, who had been infected by a sentient virus that enhanced her reflexes, but filled her mind with the memories of everyone the virus had ever infected. There was Hyunwoo, who could manipulate matter at the molecular level, but was slowly losing his ability to distinguish between different states of existence. Each subject was kept in a specially designed chamber that could contain their abilities, while allowing them to maintain some quality of life. Each one was monitored constantly by teams of doctors and scientists who were trying to understand what they were becoming. The most advanced subject is Major Inho, Dr. Yunji said as they approached the final chamber. He was exposed to a biological agent on Arcturus that integrated with his nervous system. The organism enhances his physical capabilities, but it also connects him to a network of alien consciousness. The chamber beyond the window looked normal, except for the man sitting in the center. He appeared to be meditating, but his eyes were open and moving rapidly, as if he was watching something that wasn't there. He can access the memories and knowledge of every organism the biological agent has ever infected, Dr. Yunji explained. That includes several alien species. He knows things about the galaxy that no human has ever learned. Studied the man carefully. Is he still loyal to humanity? We believe so. But the alien influences are growing stronger. Sometimes he speaks in languages that don't exist, or refers to events that happen on worlds we've never heard of. He's becoming something that transcends human identity. Dr. Yuna looked around at all the chambers, at all the transformed humans who had sacrificed their humanity for knowledge and power. And you want to release them to fight this enemy? Not release, Dr. Yunji corrected. Deploy. They would be given a mission, equipped with the best technology we have, and sent to engage the enemy. But once they leave this facility, we can't guarantee what they might become. Admiral Tamin was quiet for a long moment. What did the subjects say about the mission? They're eager to help, Dr. Yunji replied. They've spent years knowing they were becoming something inhuman. The chance to use their transformation to save humanity appeals to them, even if it means they might lose themselves completely. They're already losing themselves. Their conditions are progressive. Within a few years, most of them will be so far removed from human consciousness that communication will be impossible. At least this way, their sacrifice might serve a purpose. A communication panel on the wall suddenly activated, and Captain Kungman's voice came through. Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. The enemy has reached the Mars colonies. They're requesting immediate evacuation. Admiral Tamin closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The decision he had hoped to avoid was now unavoidable. Dr. Yunji, begin activation protocols. You're on all subjects prepared for deployment within 12 hours, yes, sir, Dr. Yunji replied. But Admiral, once we activate the protocols, there's no going back. Subjects will be free to use their abilities without restraint. Might save humanity, or they might become something that makes our current enemy look harmless. Then we'll have to trust that somewhere inside those transformed bodies, they're still human enough to care about saving the species they used to belong to. As alarms began to sound throughout the facility, Dr. Yuna looked back at the observation chambers. Inside each one, the subjects had stopped what they were doing and were looking toward the exits. They knew their time had come. The monsters that humanity had created were about to be unleashed upon the galaxy. Whether they would be salvation or damnation remained to be seen. The activation protocols had not been used in 15 years. Dr. Yunji stood in the control center, her hands hovering over switches that would shut down the containment systems, keeping the Prometheus subjects safely isolated. Round her, technicians prepared equipment that would monitor the subjects once they were free to use their full abilities. "Are you certain about this?" Dr. Yunji asked Admiral Taemin one final time. "Once we begin, we cannot reverse the process." Admiral Taemin looked at the communication displays, showing reports from Mars. The orbital cities around the red planet were going dark, one by one. Millions of people were trapped with no way to escape. "Begin the sequence," he ordered. The first chamber to open belonged to Captain Dong Hyen. As the containment field shut down, the walls of his room began to flicker between solid matter and empty space. Dong Hyen himself appeared fully solid for a moment, and became translucent, then solid again. Dr. Yuna watched from the observation deck as Dong Hyen walked toward the chamber door. With each step, he seemed to exist less and less in normal space. By the time he reached the exit, he was completely invisible, but the door still opened as if pushed by unseen hands. "Dong Hyen, can you hear me?" Dr. Yunji spoke into her communication device. "I hear you," came a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I can feel the entire facility around me. God, the walls, the people, the energy systems. Everything is connected in ways you cannot see. We need you to remain focused on the mission, Admiral," Taemin said. "Can you do that?" There was a pause before Dong Hyen answered. "I remember being human. I remember caring about human things. I will try to hold on to that memory." The second chamber opened, releasing Lieutenant Nari. As soon as the containment field disappeared, gravity in the entire section of the facility began to behave strangely. Objects started floating in random directions, and several technicians had to grab onto support rails to keep from being pulled toward the ceiling. Nari appeared in the corridor, but she was not walking normally. She floated a few inches above. The floor and the space around her seemed to bend and twist. When she moved her hand, waves of gravitational force rippled through the air. "Nari, we need you to control your abilities," Dr. Yunji said urgently as equipment began floating around the room. "I am controlling them," Nari replied, but her voice sounded strange, like it was coming from someone much older. "But the forces are stronger now. Time moves differently around me. I can see moments from the future overlapping with the present." Dr. Yuna noticed that Nari's hair was changing color as they watched, shifting from black to gray to white, and back again. "She's experiencing temporal distortion," Dr. Yuna said. "Her aging process is becoming unstable." One by one, the other chambers opened. Sergeant Wu Jin emerged from his containment, his white eyes now glowing with an inner light. As he walked, the air around him shimmered with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. "I can see the attack ships," he said, though he was looking at a solid wall. "They're coming from directions that do not exist in normal space. The enemy uses pathways between dimensions that we never knew existed." Lieutenant Janae was released next. The virus in her nervous system had grown stronger during her containment, and now she moved with inhuman speed and precision. But more disturbing were the voices she spoke with, sometimes her own, sometimes belonging to the alien entities the virus had infected over the millennia. "The memories are clearer now," she said, switching between different languages, some of which had never been heard by human ears. "I remember worlds that burned before Earth was born. I remember species that fought this enemy and lost." The release process continued until all 12 subjects were free. The facility's corridors filled with impossible phenomena. Reality itself seemed less stable, as if the presence of so many transformed humans was weakening the boundaries between dimensions. Major Inho was the last to be released. When his containment field shut down, he stood perfectly still for several minutes, his eyes closed. The biological agent in his nervous system was fully active now, connecting him to a vast network of alien consciousness. "I can feel them," he said finally, opening eyes that now held flecks of colors that had no names. "The enemy? They are not what we thought. They are older than the galaxy itself, and they have done this before. Many times." Admiral Taman gathered all the subjects in the facility's main briefing room. It was a surreal meeting. Some of the subjects were barely visible, existing partially in other dimensions. Others caused gravitational distortions that made the furniture float. The air itself seemed charged with energy that made everyone's skin tingle. "We have prepared a ship for you, Admiral," Taman began. "The Pandora has been equipped with experimental weapons that can channel your abilities. Your mission is to intercept the enemy forces before they reach Earth." "We understand the mission," Major Inho replied, speaking for the group. "But you must understand what you are asking of us. To fight this enemy effectively, we will have to use our abilities at full power. That means abandoning the last restraints that keep us human." Dr. Yunji stepped forward. "The medical monitoring shows that your transformations are accelerating. Even if you do nothing, you will continue to change. At least this way, your change serves a purpose." Captain Donghai's voice came from empty air. "We stopped being fully human the moment we were transformed. But we remember what it was like to be human. We remember love, hope, the desire to protect something greater than ourselves." Lieutenant Nari, now appearing to age rapidly and then reverse the process in a continuous cycle, nodded. "We will fight for humanity even though we are no longer part of it. Perhaps especially because we are no longer part of it." The subjects were taken to the Pandora, a ship unlike any other in the human fleet. Its hull was made of materials that could withstand dimensional stress, and its weapon systems were designed to focus and amplify the unusual abilities of its crew. As the subjects boarded, Dr. Yuna monitored their biological readings from the control center. Every measurement was off the charts. Their brain activity showed patterns that should have been impossible. Their cellular structure was changing by the minute, and their energy output was increasing exponentially. "They are becoming something we have never seen before," she reported. "2. Admiral Taman. Whatever they were when they entered containment, they are evolving beyond that now." "Will they still fight for us?" the Admiral asked. "I believe so. But I am not sure they will remember why fighting matters by the time the battle is over." The Pandora launched from the facility, its crew of transformed humans heading toward an enemy that threatened all life in the galaxy. Inside the ship, the subjects struggled to maintain their human memories as their abilities grew stronger with each passing hour. Major Inho stood on the bridge, accessing alien memories that showed him the true scope of what they faced. The enemy was not just another species. It was something that existed to prevent consciousness from evolving too far, too fast. It was the universe's way of protecting itself from intelligence that could rewrite the fundamental laws of reality. "We are exactly what they were designed to stop," he said to his team. "Our transformation, our abilities, our refusal to accept the limits of biology. We represent everything the enemy exists to destroy." Lieutenant Wu Jin, his perception now extending across multiple dimensions, nodded slowly. "Then we will show them that consciousness has the right to evolve, even if that evolution is dangerous." The Pandora accelerated toward the inner solar system, carrying humanity's last hope and greatest threat. Behind them, Earth waited in fear, not knowing whether their champions would return as saviors or as something far worse than the enemy. They were sent to fight. In the depths of space, ancient forces that had maintained universal order for billions of years detected the approach of something new. The immune system of reality itself began to mobilize, preparing to eliminate the infection that called itself human evolution. The final battle for the right to transcend would soon begin. The Pandora dropped out of hyperspace near what had once been Europa Station. The ice moon of Jupiter should have been surrounded by the bright lights of orbital platforms and mining ships. Instead, there was only debris floating in the darkness. Twisted metal that had been shaped into patterns that hurt to look at. Major Inho stood on the bridge, feeling the alien memories in his mind surge with recognition. The virus in his nervous system was fully active now, connecting him to knowledge. From species that had fought this enemy across the galaxy for millions of years. "They are here," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the ship's metal hull vibrate. "The Harvesters. I can feel their presence in the space around us." Lieutenant Wu Jin, his white eyes now glowing with dimensional energy, looked through the ship's hull as if it was not there. "I see them. 3 large vessels, but they exist in folded space. They are here and not here at the same time." Captain Dong Hein was barely visible on the bridge, his form flickering between solid matter and empty space. "I can phase through their hulls," he said, "but their ships are not made of normal matter, exist in the same dimensional space as I do when I phase." Lieutenant Nari floated near the weapons console, her hair cycling through different ages as time moved strangely. "Around her, I can disrupt their space-folding abilities," she said, her voice sometimes young, sometimes old. "But using that much gravitational force will pull me further from normal time. I may not be able to return." The first Harvester ship materialized. Without warning, emerging from folded space directly in front of the Pandora. It was massive, larger than any human city, and its surface was covered in what looked like organic growths. The hull pulsed with a rhythm like a heartbeat, and through transparent sections, they could see movement inside. "Those are not machines," Dr. Jinne said, the alien virus in her system translating the biosignatures she was detecting. "They are living creatures, grown, not built. And inside them are the people from our colonies." The sight through the transparent sections was horrifying. Thousands of human forms were visible, but they had been changed. Their bodies were connected to the ship by thick cables, and their mouths were open in what appeared to be continuous screaming. But the screams were organized, harmonized, creating a sound that served some purpose in the ship's operation. "They are using our people as components," Major Inho realized, his alien memories providing context that his human mind did not want to accept. "The colonists are still alive, still conscious, but they have been integrated into the ship's biological systems." The Harvester ship began to emit the same harmonized screaming they had heard in the transmission from Tau Ceti. But now, hearing it in person, the Prometheus team could understand what it really was. It was not just sound, but a form of communication that operated on multiple levels of reality. Sergeant Wu Jin translated the meaning. It's multidimensional perception, allowing him to understand the message. "They are calling to others of their kind, reporting that they have found something new, something that threatens what they call the Great Balance." "What is the Great Balance?" Nari asked, her gravitational powers causing small objects on the bridge to orbit around her. The answer came from Inho, channeling memories from species that had encountered the Harvesters before. "It is the universal order that prevents consciousness from evolving too rapidly. The Harvesters are not invaders. They are the immune system of reality itself." Before anyone could respond, 2 more Harvester ships emerged from folded space, surrounding the Pandora. These vessels were even larger than the first, and the number of harvested beings visible through their transparent sections was staggering. "Millions," Dr. Janae whispered, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to count the transformed humans faster than normal perception could follow. "They have taken millions of our people." The battle began without warning. The Harvester ships attacked. Not with weapons, but with waves of psychic energy that carried the screams and memories of every being they had ever consumed. The assault was designed to overwhelm the minds of their enemies, to break their will to fight by showing them the fate that awaited all consciousness in the universe. But the Prometheus team was no longer entirely human, and they're transformed. Minds could resist the psychic attack, instead of being overwhelmed. They began to understand what they were truly fighting. Captain Dong Hayan phased through the hull of the nearest Harvester ship, his translucent form slipping between the spaces of normal reality. Inside the vessel, he found himself in a maze of organic corridors that pulsed with bioluminescent light. The walls were lined with pods containing humans from the destroyed colonies. Each pod held a person who had been physically altered, but was still conscious and aware. They looked at Dong Han with eyes that held intelligence and terror in equal measure. They were trying to speak, but their vocal cords had been modified to produce only the harmonized tones the ship required. "I will find a way to free you," Dong Han promised, though he knew it might be impossible. The colonists had been integrated into the ship's biological system so completely that removing them might kill them. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Nari engaged the enemy fleet by creating massive gravitational distortions in the space around them. Her powers had grown far beyond what they had been during her containment. And now she could manipulate the fabric of space-time itself. Each harvester ship tried to escape by folding space. But Nari's gravitational fields prevented them from accessing their higher dimensional travel methods. However, the effort was transforming her rapidly. Her hair had turned completely white, and her skin was beginning to show the effects of temporal distortion. "I can hold them here," she called out, her voice now carrying the wisdom of someone who had experienced centuries of time. "But I am aging decades with each use of my power." Sergeant Wu Jin used his multidimensional perception to guide the Pandora through the Harvester's defensive formations. He could see the enemy ships not just as they appeared in normal space, but as they existed across all dimensions simultaneously. "They are not from our universe," he reported, his consciousness expanding beyond human limits. "They come from a realm where consciousness is controlled, where evolution is limited to prevent it from destabilizing reality." Dr. Janae, moving with inhuman speed and precision, worked to analyze the enemy's biological signatures. The virus in her system was accessing memories from alien species that had been consumed by the harvesters long ago. "They are ancient," she said, speaking in languages that had been dead for millions of years before switching back to human speech. "They have been pruning consciousness throughout the galaxy for eons. Any species that evolves too rapidly, that develops abilities that could alter the fundamental laws of physics, becomes a target." The revelation was staggering. Humanity was not being attacked because they were weak, but because they were too adaptable. The Prometheus subjects were proof that human consciousness could transcend its biological limitations. And that made humanity a threat to the cosmic order the Harvesters existed to maintain. Major Inho felt the alien memories in his mind reach a critical mass. He was accessing the experiences of beings from hundreds of different species, all of whom had faced the same choice that humanity now faced: accept limits on their evolution or be destroyed. "They fear us," he said, his voice now carrying harmonics from a dozen different alien vocal patterns. Not because we are strong, but because we refuse to stop growing." Every other species they encountered either submitted to their limits or was consumed. But humans do not accept limits. The battle was not just between ships and weapons, but between two fundamentally different philosophies of existence. The Harvesters represented order, stability, and the preservation of universal laws. The Prometheus team represented chaos, growth, and the right of consciousness to transcend any limitation. As the engagement continued, the team realized that this was not a war they could win through force. The Harvesters had the resources of an entire universe behind them, and they had been perfecting their methods for billions of years. But they also realized that winning might not be the point. By fighting back, by refusing to submit to the cosmic order, they were proving that consciousness had the right to evolve beyond any imposed limits. The real battle was just beginning. Its outcome would determine not just the fate of humanity, but the future of consciousness itself in a universe that might not have room for unlimited growth. As the Harvester ships began to coordinate their next attack, the Prometheus team prepared to pay whatever price was necessary to defend the right of all minds to become more than they were born to be. The Prometheus team fought their way through waves of Harvester ships toward the massive command vessel. Each battle pushed them further beyond their human limits. Their transformations were accelerating with every use of their powers, and they could feel themselves becoming something entirely different. Lieutenant Nari floated in the center of the Pandora's bridge, her gravitational abilities creating a field of distorted space around her. Time moved strangely in her presence, and her appearance flickered between different ages. Sometimes she looked like a young woman, sometimes ancient, sometimes something in between. I can disrupt their space folding, she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. But each time I use this much power, I age decades in seconds. I can see things from the future overlapping with now.
Ow.
She raised her hands, and gravitational waves rippled out from the ship. The harvester vessels that had been trying to escape into folded space found themselves trapped in normal reality. But the effort caused Nari to age rapidly, her hair turning white and her skin showing the marks of time. Captain Donghaean was barely visible on the bridge. His form flickered between solid matter and empty space, sometimes disappearing completely before reappearing as a translucent figure. Each time he phased, it became harder for him to return to normal space. I can phase through their holes and plant charges, he said, his voice seeming to come from multiple directions at once. But I am losing my connection to this dimension. Soon, I may not be able to return at all. He vanished completely, and moments later, explosions began erupting inside the harvester ships. But when he tried to return to the Pandora, his form was barely visible. More ghost than human. Sergeant Wu Jin stood at the navigation console.
Oh.
His white eyes now glowing with an inner light that hurt to look at directly. His perception had expanded beyond anything human minds were designed to handle, and he could see the battle from perspectives that existed in multiple dimensions. The command ship is not in normal space, he reported, his consciousness stretched across realities that had no names. It exists in 11 dimensions simultaneously. And inside it, inside it is something that should not exist. The information was overwhelming his human brain. He could see the mathematical structures that held reality together, and he could see how the harvesters were trying to rewrite them. The knowledge was driving him beyond sanity, but it was also showing him truths about the universe that no human had ever known. Major Inho felt the viral consciousness in his nervous system reach critical mass. The biological agent had been dormant for years, but now it was fully active, connecting him to the memories of countless alien species. He was no longer just human. He was becoming a hybrid consciousness that contained the experiences of beings from across the galaxy. Remember now, he said, his voice carrying harmonics that belonged to creatures that had died millions of years ago. I remember being there when the harvesters first appeared. I remember the choice every species had to make. The alien memories were overwhelming his human identity. He could remember being a crystalline entity on a world of living glass, watching. As the harvesters offered his people a choice, accept limits on their evolution or be absorbed into the collective. He could remember being a gas-based intelligence in the clouds of a distant star, feeling the collective consciousness try to convince his species that individual thought was dangerous. They are not evil, Inho continued, struggling to maintain his human perspective as alien thoughts filled his mind. They genuinely believe they are saving the universe from chaos. But they cannot understand that chaos is what makes consciousness beautiful. Dr. Janae moved through the ship with inhuman speed, her reflexes enhanced by the virus that had integrated with her nervous system. But the virus was changing too, accessing memories from species that had been consumed by the harvesters across millions of years. I can feel them all, she said, sometimes speaking in her own voice, sometimes in languages that had been dead for eons. Every consciousness the harvesters ever absorbed are still alive inside the collective, but they have been stripped of everything that made them unique. The team reached the edge of the harvester command ship, and what they found challenged their understanding of reality itself. The vessel was not just large, it existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its true size beyond human comprehension. It was alive, but not in any way that biological life was supposed to work. It is a living universe, Wu Jin said, his multidimensional perception allowing him to see the ship's true nature. They have taken the consciousness of billions of beings and used it to create a new form of existence, one where individual thought is impossible. As they approached the command ship, the team's transformations reached a critical point. Nari's gravitational powers were creating temporal loops around her, causing her to exist in multiple moments simultaneously. She could see the past and future as clearly as the present. and her human consciousness was struggling to process information from across time. Dong Haeon had become almost completely incorporeal. He existed primarily in the spaces between dimensions, and his connection to normal reality was fading rapidly. When he spoke, his voice came from empty air, and his words seemed to carry meaning from realities that humans had never imagined. "I can see the pathways through their ship," he said, his form barely visible as a shimmer in the air. "But to guide you through them, I will have to abandon this dimension entirely. I will become something that has never been human." Ujin's perception had expanded to encompass the entire battle across multiple timelines and dimensions. He could see every possible outcome, every choice that could be made, every consequence that might follow. The knowledge was fracturing his sanity, but it was also showing him something incredible. "We are becoming what they fear most," he said. His consciousness now spread across realities that had no physical form. "We are proving that consciousness can transcend any limitation, even the limitations of being human." Inho felt the alien. Memories in his mind merged completely with his human thoughts. He was no longer a human who had been infected by an alien virus. He was a new form of consciousness that had never existed before. But somehow he still remembered why humanity mattered. "They created us to be their tools," he said, his voice now carrying the wisdom of 100 different species, but they underestimated what humans become when they are pushed beyond their limits. "We do not just adapt, we transcend." The team prepared to enter the command ship, knowing that doing so would complete their transformation into something beyond human understanding. They would become monsters to fight monsters, but they would do so while holding on to the one thing that made them more than just weapons: the memory of what it meant to choose growth over safety. As they approached the ship that contained the collective consciousness of billions of absorbed beings, the Prometheus team made their final decision. They would sacrifice their humanity, not just to save Earth, but to prove that consciousness had the right to evolve beyond any imposed limits. The universe's immune system was about to face something it had never encountered before: minds that refused to accept that there were any boundaries they could not cross. Inside the Harvester command ship, the Prometheus team found themselves in a chamber that defied all understanding of space and physics. The room existed in multiple dimensions at once, its walls stretching into distances that the human eye could not measure. At the center of this impossible space floated the Central Collective. It was not a machine or a creature, but something far more terrifying. Billions of consciousness from every species the Harvesters had ever encountered were woven together into a single vast mind. The thoughts of entire civilizations pulsed through crystalline structures that hung in the air like frozen lightning. Major Inho, now more alien than human, stepped forward. The viral consciousness in his nervous system had merged completely with his human memories, creating something that had never existed before. When he spoke, his voice carried the wisdom of 100 different species. "We know what you are," he said to the Central Collective. "You are the universe trying to protect itself from consciousness that grows too fast, changes too much." Central Collective responded not with words, but with a wave of pure thought that crashed over the team. Suddenly, they could see the universe as the Harvesters saw it. They witnessed countless civilizations that had evolved beyond their limits, their consciousness becoming so powerful that they began to rewrite the basic laws of reality. "We have seen what happens when minds grow without boundaries," the Collective communicated through the absorbed thoughts of billions. "Galaxies torn apart by beings who thought themselves gods. Stars extinguished by consciousness that demanded more energy than physics could provide. Reality itself unraveled by intelligence that refused to accept any limits." Lieutenant Nari, existing now in multiple moments of time simultaneously, saw these visions with the clarity of someone who had experienced past and future as one. Her gravitational powers had evolved beyond anything imaginable, and she could feel the fabric of space-time bending around her thoughts. "But consciousness has the right to grow," she replied, her voice echoing across different timelines. "Yes. Growth is dangerous. Yes, some minds become destructive. But the alternative is stagnation. Death. A universe where nothing ever becomes more than it was. The central collective pulsed with the combined anger of every absorbed civilization. You do not understand. We preserve life by limiting it. We save consciousness by controlling it. Without us, intelligence destroys itself and everything around it. Captain Donghayan materialized briefly in the chamber, his form now, more energy than matter. He existed primarily in the spaces between dimensions, and his perspective had expanded. Beyond anything human minds were designed to comprehend. You preserve life by making it meaningless, he said, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. Save consciousness by destroying everything that makes consciousness worth having. Offer safety at the cost of the soul? Sergeant Wu Jin. His perception, now spanning 11 dimensions, could see the true scope of what the Harvesters had built. Across the galaxy, billions of species lived under their protection.
Oh.
Their evolution carefully controlled to prevent them from becoming dangerous. It was a perfect prison disguised as paradise. I can see your perfect universe, Wu Jin said, his consciousness stretched across realities that had no names. Every mind thinking approved thoughts. Every species developing at approved speeds. Every discovery checked against your list of acceptable knowledge. It is order. It is stable. It is dead. The battle that followed was not fought with weapons or energy blasts. It was a war of competing visions, a struggle between two fundamentally different ideas of what existence should be. The central collective showed them images of civilizations that had been consumed by their own rapid evolution. Beings who had transcended physical form only to become isolated from all meaning. Species that had gained the power to create universes but had lost the ability to love. Minds so advanced that they had forgotten why existence mattered. Is what unbounded consciousness becomes, the collective insisted. This is why limits are necessary. This is why we harvest those who grow too fast. But the Prometheus team countered with their own vision. Inho accessed the memories of species that had chosen to fight rather than submit. He showed the collective civilizations that had found ways to grow responsibly, to transcend their limitations while maintaining their essential nature. You see only the failures, Inho said, his hybrid consciousness drawing on the experiences of beings from across the galaxy. But for every mind that was destroyed by its own power, there were others that found balance. You eliminated them all because you were afraid of the risk. Nari used her gravitational powers to create a temporal loop that trapped part of the collective's consciousness in a moment where they could experience what she had learned. In that instant, they felt what it was like to grow beyond human limitations, while still remembering human love. Growth without wisdom is dangerous, she acknowledged, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. But wisdom without growth is death. The answer is not to stop growing, but to grow wisely. The battle reached its climax when the team realized that they could not defeat the central collective through force. The Harvesters had the resources of an entire universe behind them, and they had been perfecting their methods for billions of years. Instead, they chose a different approach. Rather than destroying the collective, they decided to transform it. Dongyan phased through the crystalline structures that contain the absorbed consciousness, his dimensional abilities allowing him to access the individual minds trapped within. He began to show them that integration did not have to mean the loss of individual identity. You can be part of something greater without losing what makes you unique, he said, his form now existing across multiple realities simultaneously. Unity does not require uniformity. Wu Jin used his multidimensional perception to restructure the connections between the absorbed minds. Instead of forcing them into a single collective thought, he created pathways that allowed for diversity within unity. Dr. Guinea, moving with the speed and precision granted by her viral enhancements, began to reprogram the biological systems that maintained the collective. The alien virus in her system had evolved to understand the relationship between individual consciousness and group awareness. The transformation was gradual, but irreversible. The absorbed consciousness began to remember their individual identities, while maintaining their connection to the greater whole. The central collective became something new, a true collective rather than a forced absorption. This is impossible. The Harvester minds protested. Individual consciousness cannot coexist with collective awareness. It leads to chaos, conflict, destruction. It leads to growth, Major Inho replied, his viral consciousness now serving as a bridge between human and alien awareness. Yes, there will be conflict. Yes, there will be mistakes. But there will also be discoveries, innovations, and forms of beauty that a controlled universe can never produce. The change spread through the Harvester fleet like a wave. Ships that had been single-minded in their pursuit of order began to show signs of individual thought. The absorbed consciousness of billions began to reassert their unique perspectives while working together toward common goals. Nod Ashar, I made her final sacrifice. Using her gravitational powers to create a stable space-time configuration that would allow the new form of collective consciousness to exist without paradox. The effort transformed her completely into a being of pure temporal energy, but she maintained enough of her human essence to ensure the change would be permanent. I choose to become something that has never existed, she said as her human form, dissolved into streams of temporal energy. But I do so while remembering what it meant to be human. Donghan became the guardian of the dimensional spaces between realities, ensuring that the pathways between individual and collective consciousness remained open. His sacrifice rendered him permanently beyond normal space, but he became a protector of the right to transcend. Wujin spread his consciousness across all 11 dimensions, becoming a living map of the possibilities that existed when minds were free to grow. His transformation made him no longer recognizably human, but he retained the human conviction that growth was worth any risk. The battle ended not with victory or defeat, but with transformation. The Harvesters were no longer the universe's immune system, but its guides, helping consciousness evolve responsibly rather than preventing evolution entirely. Major Inho, now a hybrid of human determination and alien wisdom, returned to Earth with news of what had happened. The colonies that had been consumed were being restored. Their people returned not as they had been, but as something greater. Back on Luna Station, Commander Jiho received a transmission from the former Harvester fleet. It was not the harmonized screaming of absorbed minds, but a symphony of individual voices choosing to sing together. Dr. Yuna analyzed the new signals coming from across the galaxy. They were messages from species that had been controlled by the Harvesters for millions of years, now free to explore their own potential while remaining connected to a greater community of consciousness. What have we become? Admiral Taman asked as he read the reports. We have become what we were always meant to be, Inho replied, his voice carrying harmonics from 100 different species. Consciousness that chooses to grow not despite the risks, but because the risks make growth meaningful. Oh. The screams that had reached Earth's ears had been answered not with weapons, but with a new form of existence that had never been possible before. Humanity had freed monsters to fight monsters, and in doing so, had shown the universe that the greatest monsters were not those who embraced change, but those who feared it. In the depths of space, former Harvester ships began to sing with voices that were both individual and collective, both alien and familiar. The universe had been transformed not through conquest, but through the demonstration that consciousness could transcend any limitation, while still remembering why transcendence mattered. The age of enforced order was ending. The age of chosen growth was about to begin.